And just over 200 kilometers for this 7th day of racing. And like yesterday, not a single categorized climb on the profile.
Yeah, this one really looks like it's made for the sprinters. There is that little bump there fairly late in the race with, 10 or so kilometers to go. But it does look like a day for the sprinters, and they're going to want it because they're not going to have any opportunities for a bunch more days.
And this is live out on the road from the back of the field that is chasing a 3-man breakaway. They have pulled them to within 3 minutes with just over 63 kilometers now left to go. 3 riders in the breakaway today. Christian Nies, this German ride here for Team Sky, the 32-year-old, along with Marco Pinotti, the veteran for BMC, and Francisco Aramendia, the 26-year-old for Caja Rural. Went away much earlier in the stage, and the gap climbed a bit higher earlier in the day, now slowly and incrementally coming down just inside that 3-minute mark, and a long way to go. So the peloton not really concerned at this point. None of these 3 riders a big long-term threat on the general classification.
Aramendia, man, we've seen featuring in the breaks before. Now, Marco Pinotti here, Steve, a very interesting case. He is considering retirement, and he's just trying to make that decision. He has a very strong likelihood, he said, that this will be his last Grand Tour. He's not sure if he's going to race on a slightly less, well, let's say grand scale next year. But he's an engineer. He's known for his scientific approach to training and looking at his power meter right there. And we don't know if we're going to see him in another Grand Tour.
And this is Aramendia, the 26-year-old from the Caja Rural team. He was the most combative rider of last year's Vuelta a Espana, always trying to make a breakaway whenever he sees the opportunity. Found it today, and he's one of the 3 that have defined stage number 7 so far. And as far as what's at stake in today's racing, well, last sprint stage until day 12. So obviously that is certainly on the minds of the fastest men in the field. Philippe Gilbert, what's on his mind? Well, seems like he's pretty at ease right now, but probably a little stress that he still has not won in the rainbow jersey of world champion, and running out of time before the world championships come up late in September. Well,
he certainly didn't look like he was thinking much about bike racing there, did he? And these are those days where a lot of guys, especially with 3 guys off the front with 60K to go and only 3 minutes advantage, it's not too dangerous. So a lot of guys can be relaxed and just catch up with some of their friends in the peloton.
Bach Mollema talking with Dan Martin of the Garmin Sharp team. I'm trying to listen in to see what the conversation was. Not often do you get an opportunity to hear riders talking with one another like that. Couldn't really make it out, but
yeah, I couldn't either. It seemed like
to be a very important conversation, more lighthearted.
Well, they're typically fairly lighthearted until you get down to business late in the race, and then they're not really conversations anymore. Then they're incredibly short.
Now, once again, sunny skies, warm temperatures, and maybe one of the hottest days of the race so far, because they are heading south into the Andalusia region, where it really gets up there in terms of the temperature. And that is Vincenzo Nibali wearing the red jersey. 4th day in this first week. He is worn red. Former Vuelta winner and this year's champion at his home Grand Tour, the Giro d'Italia. So that's where we stand. 3-man breakaway, just over 3 minutes up the road now, with just about 60 kilometers left to go on day 7 of the Vuelta. The main field led by Omega Pharma Quick-Step. They have our 3 leaders within 2 minutes, with just over 40 kilometers left to go on this 7th day of the season's final Grand Tour. The race today, 206 kilometers long. One of only 2 stages at the Vuelta this year in excess of 200K. They have one more intermediate sprint to come. No categorized climbs. A largely flat day. Heading into the Andalusia region around Sevilla in southern Spain today. Warm temperatures, sunny skies. The Vuelta known for its rather short stages, not like the other Grand Tours where you get more that are over 200 kilometers. They tend to keep them short, succinct, and to the point.
Well, the idea there, Steve, is to make the racing a little bit more spirited and to really just sort of cut to the chase and let's get down to business. These guys today will be out for about 122 miles, so it is a long day in the saddle, no doubt about it, and only 1 minute 45-second advantage for the breakaway trio. Not looking so good for them.
They will see the finish line for the first time at that second intermediate sprint, which comes with 31.4 kilometers left to go on the stage, and it's become a pattern in this first week of the Vuelta to make some interesting features stick out on the road. Some technical corners in the final 10K. There are 6 roundabouts within the last 3K today alone. The last one, turning right, is just 700 meters from the line. The road then bends slightly to the left at 300 meters. There's a big right-hand turn just inside of 1K to the line. So there are some turns to deal with inside the final few kilometers as you see how warm the temperature is now. Really getting up there at 37 degrees Celsius. Gogo, I'll let you do the conversion because mentally, if I try to do it on the fly in my head, I know I'd come up with some crazy numbers. So I'll let you take care of that.
You think you'd mess it up, huh?
I probably would. Instead, I'll just point out that we're under 40K to go.
Yeah, well, let's call it 99 degrees, so a nice hot day. And the other thing about the heat is that it gets the guys dehydrated, and tomorrow is a critical day. So today, a day before a big summit finish, everybody needs to be thinking long-term. They need to be thinking about how tough the race will be tomorrow and how they better get their, not only their calories today, but their liquids in.
Well, it's an interesting day because with the big mountain day tomorrow, you know the general classification riders are going to sit back and save themselves for the weekend. So you know you have to place a field sprint type of stage ahead of the mountains this weekend. Yet, what the organizers have done is not make it so straightforward, so textbook, that it becomes boring and predictable. They throw in those corners, little undulation, some roundabouts, just to keep it open-ended and create enough variables that it still makes it interesting going into the finale on a day when you know it has to be a sprinter stage. Indeed.
And Steve, these race promoters that put these events together, they're thinking about a lot of different factors. They want to go to a certain town. They want to start in a certain town. They want to lead to an area where they can be close to the mountains and so on. And so they have to put that all into the hopper and figure out how to design the courses. And literally, they have people who go out the whole year, like right after this race is over, they start thinking about next year's race. And they go out and people who are really familiar with the countryside, and they start scouting for areas and roads that they can use in the next year's race. They ask towns for proposals to be part of the race, and they spend the entire next year preparing for the race as soon as this one is over.
Ah, yes. Piedra, who was, I believe, in the break for Caja Rural yesterday. He is from the finishing town today, has a lot of family and friends coming out, and they are coming into that finishing town now. You see the 8K banner just behind the riders? That is to where the finish line is set up. Again, they're going to go through it twice today, so the first time is just about 7 kilometers or so from where they are at this point. And that's going to be an intermediate sprint. They'll loop around the town and then come back around to finish the stage. So we'll see them hitting that intermediate sprint as we continue with our live coverage on the 7th day of the Vuelta here on Universal Sports. Live coverage of stage 7 of the Vuelta a Espana, brought to you by Earbuds. Almost 35 kilometers left to go. Gap hovering at just under 2 minutes now to our 3 breakaway riders. Again, Francisco Armendia, Christian Nies, and Marco Pinotti, the day's defining break. Being chased by this peloton, Lampre in the pink and blue at the front. Garmin Sharp, Omega Pharma Quickstep, Argos, Movistar among the teams up there now, and just about 4 kilometers away from the second intermediate sprint, which is at the finish line of today's stage. So they're going to get a nice peek at what the run-in is going to look like when they come around the town and do it for real in just a little while. And it's a good thing we're going to have that dress rehearsal because, as I mentioned just a short while ago, a lot of turns and roundabouts to deal with in the final few kilometers. Even inside the final K itself, there's some turns that the riders will take note of because positioning later on in the sprint could be key to getting the win.
And have a look at this one right here, all the way around. It's a pretty big traffic roundabout, so it's not that big a deal. You can see most of the guys still pedaling through it. If it were a little bit smaller, that would be really tricky, but look at how small the roads are at this point.
Narrow and twisting.
Steve, you mentioned just a moment ago Antonio Piedra, the local man from the town. He described today's finale as full of traps.
So these 3 riders will be first through that sprint point at the line. As the peloton rolls in behind them.
And Steve, those real narrow parts that they hit occasionally, those are the places where the peloton is going to be absolutely screaming before at such high speed, because all the riders know that if they're not in good positions where the road is narrow, there's no way at all to move up.
And again, earlier we saw Lee Howard of the Orica Green Edge team with the paper that had the profile and the map for today's stage out on his handlebars, looking at it, getting a sense of what was to come. So now they're going to get an actual look at what it will appear to be when they finish the stage. So it's an interesting time because the riders get to see it firsthand, then they can discuss it among themselves, have a conversation with the team director, and talk tactics out on the road once they make the big loop.
Indeed, and you can see like this right-hander here, and then where the front of the peloton is, that little tiny road. So they got to put that all into their memory, and they're going to have to make sure that they strategize accordingly for the final time they see it.
Just about 2 kilometers away for these 3 riders.
Pinotti is a very interesting case study in a time trialist because he's not a big guy. He's on the front of this group right now, and yet he's a 6-time national time trial champion of Italy. And in fact, last year he looked like he was really on the way to a medal at the Worlds when he crashed out in the time trial. The thing about Pinotti is he's a perfectionist. He has a very slippery position. He's super aero. He gets very low and very narrow.
Now look how it's stretched out single file here, and this isn't even the end of the stage. Looks like the field now going under the 2K banner to where the finish line is positioned, but another roundabout just ahead of that. And our 3 leaders. Christian Nees pacing the way for Team Sky. Pinotti from BMC behind him, and then Armandia. Now the peloton really moving, but they should feel pretty good about the margin to these 3 riders right now, as we're down to the final half K to the intermediate sprint for the breakaway.
I don't expect any of the guys in the break really too concerned. Maybe the Spaniard in the middle, Armandia, just to showboat a little in front of his home crowd because he's a Spanish rider. These guys really just trying to work very well together to stay away from the peloton more than anything.
So that that was the intermediate sprint. That will be the finish line in just over 30 kilometers from now. And seeing it for the first time, as we just did, those final 500 meters didn't look too bad.
No, they really didn't, Steve. And it's also slightly uphill as well.
All right, so the 1K banner was right there. We saw the red kite as the field went through. Our 3 leaders have gone through the finish line. They're out on the loop now around town.
I have to say, this brings back memories of feelings I had being in breakaways late in the race. You go through a big city like this with large crowds and everybody cheering for you, and it can just give you chills up and down your body because there's so much energy in that crowd, and their cheering is almost like transferring some of that energy to you to try and succeed.
So it's that turn, that right-hander with about 700 meters to go, that looks like it's going to be the only difficult thing in the final kilometer in terms of messing up a potential sprint, as Katusha will lead the field across the line now.
Yeah, just that slight little bend there in sight of the finish line, but pretty wide, pretty good for a big bunch finish. Pretty straightforward. It should be down to the fast men, but hey, it was pretty straightforward yesterday too, and it was a very unusual finish after all.
Well, they only have 6 seconds at the 5K banner, so that's plenty of time for this field to bring them back.
Yeah, a lot of different teams now coming into the mix. Orica Green Edge could not do it on their own. So now it's Movistar up there.
It's like Valverde was second wheel. This is that roundabout we saw before where they went all the way around. So several roundabouts and some technical corners, but the final kilometer, not as bad as the initial profile indicated. They have a turn at 700 meters to go, but it looks like the sprint should be pretty straightforward if it comes down to that. Gilbert and Stybar still hanging on out front with 4K left.
Steve, the sprint, the course may be pretty straightforward, but I just wonder how straightforward the eventual sprint will be if they catch the 2 leaders, because you look at the front of the field, 2 Movistar, 1 Lampre, 1 Euskaltel. There is no team up there with strength in numbers. It is completely mixed up right now.
And if that's the case and it continues this way, it's going to come down to positioning and just all-out speed.
Indeed, and now I'm seeing 3 Skymen up there for Edvald Boassenhagen in the black with a blue vertical stripe. He's a guy who's been trying for it as well.
It may be a freelance opportunity that a rider takes to springboard to a win. But first, they have to catch these 2 riders who are still leading with 3K left.
And this is that section coming off of those bricks and cobbles there that the peloton is really sketchy. And look at Philippe. Boy, he does have some good form. There's no doubt about it. He is absolutely smoking. Now 3K to go.
All around these tight corners and the narrow roads, hard to tell exactly what their advantage is over the peloton. Well, now it's 12 seconds, so they've doubled their advantage from the last benchmark on the road. Under 3 kilometers left. They're making it interesting here.
Movistar still on the front right now with 2 guys, and that's not going to bring back the breakaway. There's no way that if we see it like this much longer, those Movistar guys can't do it. They need a team with several guys or a few teams to come to the front right now. This is touch and go.
Not many other teams for the pure sprinters can do it. This is Dan Martin, who crashed. Number 111 has teammates with him trying to get back up into the field here.
That's not looking good for him.
The top sprinters teams just don't have that collective strength right now to come to the front. Orica Green Edge, one of the only teams that can do it. They were riding at the front a short while ago, but now they've dropped off.
Indeed, this is looking actually pretty good right now for the breakaway duo of Gilbert on the front, Stybar behind him, a Belgian and a Czech rider there.
They're adding to their lead here. 16
Oh.
seconds. they may take it.
I think they have a very good shot at this point, Steve. They are really flying right now. And you know what? Gilbert has to be careful. He's a good finisher, but he cannot underestimate the newfound speed of Zdeněk Štýbar. Štýbar was not used to sprinting on the road, and he found something he didn't know he had at Eneco Tour.
And Gilbert has been doing more work than Štýbar. He's been at the front of that duo more than he's been sitting on. And he was the man who made the initial acceleration that Štýbar followed. Here they are with 1.5 kilometers left to go.
Oh, it is definitely going to be down to the wire.
Just like yesterday.
Oh, my goodness.
And again, it's an Omega Pharma Quick-Step rider. Yesterday it was Tony Martin. Today, Štýbar. He's got company in Gilbert. They're trying to steal it from the sprinters here. And coming up on the final kilometer. And no organized chase by one sprinter's team behind.
Oh, that plays beautifully into the hands of the breakaway duo. It still doesn't mean they've got it made, but it definitely helps them stay away.
There's the red kite, just over 1/2 mile to the finish. I think they got it.
Yeah, at this point, I would agree with you. They have it. It's Orica on the front, FDJ there in the second spot. And,
all right.
And then Argos, so...
Who are you thinking, Gogo? Štýbar, Gilbert?
I would really like to see the lead duo and see if Štýbar is sitting on at this point or if he is still swapping poles. If he's not swapping poles, he could take Philippe.
All right, there's an FDJ rider in the blue who's launched a move from the field now. The cat and mouse. And they can't play games for much longer here because now the train is in full effect at 1/2 kilometer to go. FDJ, Argos chasing. Gilbert and Štýbar trying to hang on here.
Well, Štýbar is in the perfect position, not having to do any work, but are they going to get caught?
They can't wait. They got to go. Now Štýbar accelerates past Philippe Gilbert. Gilbert's second wheel at 150 meters left to go. Štýbar's trying to pull away. Here comes the pack behind him. Zdeněk Štýbar watches Gilbert come up alongside and at the finish line. Štýbar raising his arms in celebration. What a sprint at the end of stage 7.
Oh, Štýbar denying the reigning world champion. I tell you what, the Czech rider is really showing something special this year, Steve.
Yesterday, Omega Pharma Quick-Step's Tony Martin was just caught at the line. Today, his teammate Štýbar just survives at the finish to get the win. The 27-year-old from the Czech Republic, Zdeněk Štýbar, coming off his overall win at the Eneco Tour just prior to the Vuelta, now gets a stage win here on the 7th day of the Spanish Grand Tour, coming around Philippe Gilbert at the very end. Once again denying the reigning world champion an elusive win in the rainbow jersey. And he is our performance of the day, presented by Earbuds. It was close. Because they were coming.
He was very much in that position where he had to jump. He sat on Gilbert, waited as the charge came. He kept looking back. And then right at the last moment, he said, okay, I gotta go now. And they were so close to the finish line, Gilbert could not recover, close the gap, and get around him.
Gilbert almost did come around him, though. Right here. Boy, it was close.
It's funny how it works like that, but that's when everybody has everything on the line. There's no categorized climbs over the first 95 miles of the race, but the last 9, which brings them up to 104 for the total, is that big climb, 3,150 feet of vertical, and that one is going to create a little bit of separation. It starts out quite hard. The 12.5% is early on, and then it levels off a little bit.
And we are looking down live at the peloton on a sunny and hot day in southern Spain. And as far as what is at stake in this stage number 8, I think the big thing is the unknown climb at the end that should really heat up the general classification, may not decide it, but it's a climb that's never been used before in the Vuelta. A lot of these riders, even many of the Spaniards, don't know the climb, so that always adds that element of mystery and intrigue.
Indeed. I talked with Chris Horner's director yesterday. I asked if he had seen the climb, and he said no, they've seen video of the climb. Same thing for Belkin, for Balcamolama. They hadn't seen the climb either. They had video of the climb that they were reviewing. So that tells me two things. One, they're busy guys and they don't have time to go look at all the courses. And two, maybe they don't think it's going to be incredibly selective, but that also throws a little bit of an unknown into it as well.
There is a little more than 40 kilometers left to go on the stage, and this peloton is just over 4 minutes behind our largest breakaway of the race so far. 13 riders up the road today. The team in the turquoise, that is Espana, the team of overall race leader Vincenzo Nibali, wearing a red jersey today, staying near the front of the peloton. But so far in this first week, the size of the breakaways have been pretty small. 4 or 5 guys, even a one-rider breakaway in Tony Martin just a couple of stages ago. There is Joaquim Rodriguez in the red and white of Katusha, team leader of that squad, riding alongside his trusty teammate Daniel Moreno. And actually, Moreno in the white jersey could be a better candidate for the stage win than Perito here today. This climb really doesn't suit Rodriguez as much as some of the other climbs later in the race because of its steady gradients near the finish. He likes the short, punchy, explosive climbs that are short and steep just near the top.
Indeed, and you saw Moreno in a different jersey, the white jersey, as the leader of the combination category, which is the guy who has the smallest number of the sum of their position in general classification, mountains, and points. And he's been very consistent, also has won a stage so far in this year's Vuelta.
All right, the gap slowly coming down. Its largest margin was 4.5 minutes at 1 point, but 13 riders up the road, the peloton in pursuit, and still 40 kilometers left to go on stage 8 of the Vuelta. 13 Vuelta a Espana on Universal Sports is presented by Your Buds. Never hurt, never fall out, never stop. And now, on to an increasingly popular segment here on our Vuelta coverage, Ask Gogo, or Stump Gogo as I prefer. We take your tweets, we read them on the air, and Gogo interacts. And this next tweet here on stage number 8 coming from Andrew. What's the strategy behind the breakaways? They never make it, and don't they just wear themselves out more? Gogo, what say you?
They absolutely do wear themselves out, and in a 3-week race like the Vuelta a Espana, it can actually cause guys not to be able to finish the full 3 weeks of racing because they get so tired from being in breaks. But the reason they do that is because once in a while they are successful. They get their name out there, they get their team out there and their sponsors. And when you look at all these riders from up above here, Lampre, BMC, Vacansoleil, Omega Pharma, whatever the team is, they're putting a lot of money into these teams. Over $10 million in most of the team's budgets in this bike race. And they got to pay for it somehow. So one way to do that is to put a guy in the break.
And sometimes a rider may be going through his hometown or have friends and family out on the course, so they want to be out front when the race goes through. There's many different reasons why you may be in the breakaway outside of just trying to win a stage.
Yeah, and on top of that, let's take a couple of days ago when Tony Martin did a almost 110-mile individual time trial effort. That meant that his teammates didn't have to chase all day. And in very many situations, if your team doesn't have to chase, then if you do get caught from that break later on, one of your teammates can win the race because they're fresh and they've been able to ride the wheels of the other guys who are chasing.
It's been very exciting almost every single day, especially at the end of the stages in our first week, with Tony Martin getting caught right at the line, with Philippe Gilbert and Zdenek Stybar yesterday battling it out right before the field was about to catch them at the end of yesterday's stage 7. One true sprint stage won by the Aussie Michael Matthews, an up-and-coming sprinter. So we've seen a lot of action, a lot of drama, and a lot of excitement in the first week. And hey, as we get into week number 2 today, this is where the real racing is about to begin. So the best is yet to come.
Indeed. A lot of guys are going to start to get sorted out over these next 4 days of racing that we have up until the time trial on stage 11. We're going to see a lot of changes, and we're going to start to see who is really at this race with the legs to get it done.
And let's consider the possibilities of the next 3 days in particular. Michael Charel, number 15 of AG2R, sitting back in the field here. 3 straight summit finishes today, tomorrow, and on Monday. 3 increasingly difficult mountain stages from today through tomorrow into Monday. They get harder every single day by just a little bit every day. So if you're a general classification rider, you've been biding your time so far, how do you approach these next 3 days? What are you looking to do tactically?
I think today you're looking to follow a little bit and not lose time, but not necessarily gain a bunch of time. And let's just note here that Matthew Boucher picked up that intermediate sprint there along the way from the breakaway group, but I'm sure they weren't really sprinting for it. The guys are really just trying to stay away from the peloton, most likely. But so today, to answer your question, Steve, you want to mark the other guys that are dangerous. If you're in trouble, you try and let a guy go who's maybe just a little bit less of a favorite at the end, and then maybe we get another unusual person to snatch a stage victory. And as we get closer to Monday, so the next 2 stages, you can start thinking about being more aggressive. But if you're super aggressive on today's climb, you might be vulnerable tomorrow or the next day.
So we're down to the final 35.5 kilometers of stage 8, and this big breakaway, watching their time slip away ever so slightly, 3:22 up the road. And Horner now just 3 seconds off the general classification lead of Vincenzo Nibali, sitting in 2nd place as we come into another summit finish on stage number 8. And with time bonuses, it's certainly a possibility that he could take back that red jersey, and he says he's going to try. He wants to go for it today, get that red jersey back, especially because of the way he lost it, with the gap that occurred on stage number 4 at the finish. And that's the reason that Nibali is wearing red today and not Horner.
Yeah, Steve, it was really a shame, and I actually spoke with Jose Acevedo, his director, yesterday. Just checked in with him, asked him how Chris was doing, and he said Chris is really good right now. His condition is good, he's recovering well, and he's looking to go for it today. And Acevedo was pretty disappointed the way there was that split in the peloton in that finishing day on stage 4, the day after Chris picked up the jersey. So he ended up losing it on a finish where nobody really expected that. Even Vincenzo Nibali had left the stage because he didn't know he was back in the jersey.
They were all coasting across the finish line. Everybody thought that they got the same time, but it was determined there was a small gap between Nibali's group and Horner's group, just enough for Nibali to take back the red jersey. So Horner in 2nd place instead of 1st as we come to the summit finish on stage number 8.
And Steve, you know, like I was talking about Leopold Koenig earlier and how it looks like we got a crash here maybe on the back of the peloton. If not a crash, certainly a major bottleneck.
Enough to slow the guys down here at the very tail end of the race. And as Reinhard van Rensburg of Argo Shimano, who was in the white there, and well, here in the green, this is Michael Matthews, the leader of the points competition, and the sprinter for Orica Green Edge, who was also caught back there.
Yeah, Christian Knies, the man for Sky, who was in the break yesterday, and it is going fast. So let's see if we actually, oh yeah, we did have a couple guys. It looks like they just got stuck there with that guardrail. I'm telling you, man.
It's a little fender bender.
It is not easy to get through these towns with all the traffic control devices when you're in a peloton of 175 guys. You just get pushed out and squeezed, and guys make mistakes, and they're just riding so close together.
And you were going to say about Horner?
Well, what I was going to say about Horner is it's a very similar story to what I was saying about Leopold Koenig, who has his NetApp team on the front, and he's hoping, I think he's hoping that he can fly under the radar a little bit of the true favorites and try and pick up a stage win. And Horner at the start of the race today said the same thing. He goes, you know what? Nibali is going to be watching Rodriguez and Valverde more than they're going to be watching Horner. And he's hoping he can capitalize. Even though he's already won a stage and been the race leader, he's not looked at as one of the 3 biggest favorites. He's just that half a step below them for the general classification, and he's hoping that he can capitalize on that fact.
Well, the riders coming into the town of Estepona, where the second located at 19 kilometers from the finish. As you might have guessed, a very popular resort and holiday town. Over 20 kilometers of beaches, harbors, and coastline here in southern Spain. And ironically enough, this city was actually chosen by the Walt Disney Organization in the early 1990s as the original site for the Euro Disney project before it later went to Paris, where it's now become a fixture. So they were originally going to put Euro Disney here instead of Paris.
No kidding.
I would not kid you, Gogo. Especially not about Disney World.
You wouldn't? Well, you know, maybe they should have put it here because it seems like it's struggled a little bit in Paris, hasn't it? Do you know about their financial situation?
Well, the breakaway here, not contesting the field sprint, but I would have loved to have seen Space Mountain off to the right as the riders rolled through here in the Vuelta.
Exactly. Right there, sort of hovering over the water.
So, getting down to the final 20K of racing. That means just about half a dozen kilometers from the start of that last climb. The Peñas Blancas. First time it's ever featured in the Vuelta a Espana. A climb of 14.5 kilometers, averaging 6.5%, but hits a maximum of 12.5% in the first 2K before it steadies out the rest of the way between about 6 and 8%.
Yeah, and Steve, look at the peloton. It is totally strung out. Cannondale came to the front with a lot of men. They still have 2 men on the front, but everybody now scrambling for position because they know this thing's going to come blowing apart at the bottom of the climb.
Our leaders. Starting the climb with a 1-minute advantage.
And you could see just how narrow it was back there. That also makes things sketchy in the peloton. As you could see, the Garmin Sharp rider there getting rid of any extra weight. Alex Howes, the American, got rid of some food and things he wasn't going to be able to eat at this point in the race, but picking up a bottle there to cool off with.
Now Radio Shack coming to the front of the main field, riding for Chris Horner.
Very interesting to see, and look at all the men they have on the front for Radio Shack. At least 4 of them up there.
Katusha also working at the front of the field for Joaquim Rodriguez, their overall leader.
Look at the gap just plummeting now as riders take these really hard pulls on the front of the peloton, and then they just swing off and get dropped.
Looks like Horner is second wheel there. He is indeed. And then Joaquim Rodriguez a few wheels back for Katusha. This is up to the very front of the stage. Azanza for the Euskaltel squad. This is the steepest part of the climb where it gets over 12%. The 13-rider breakaway now seeing cracks form in the foundation. And 4 riders for Radio Shack now at the front. Chris Horner, second wheel again. Right behind Fabian Cancellara, who is leading the way.
Boy, Cancellara has some great form right now, I have to say. He is going to be tough to beat at the Worlds.
Vincenzo Nibali also there near the front in the red jersey as the overall race leader for Astana. Today, he can kind of sit back, mark wheels, and ride more conservatively. He doesn't need to take time. He can just play it easy here and follow the riders that are his main rivals.
Indeed, it puts him in a very enviable position. Now, let's remember that Chris Horner has a teammate up the road in Matthew Boucher in this breakaway group. So if this group had a little bit more of an advantage coming into the climb, that could potentially really be a big benefit for Chris. But with them being so close, it may not actually help. But you know, if Chris can get across and get the help of Boucher, it could propel him up the road.
Other riders starting to lose some contact with the main field as it gets stretched out on the lower slopes of this climb. Horner with teammates at the front, 3 seconds behind Nibali on the general classification. Coming up to the steep point now. where it gets up close to 12% and beyond.
And who said Fabian Cancellara couldn't go uphill, as he's still at the front of the peloton, sitting second wheel when so many guys have already been dropped. That's the thing about Spartacus. He can go up a short hill very rapidly.
The breakaway group had a lead of 4.5 minutes at one point earlier in the stage. It's down under a minute now with 13.5 kilometers remaining. Radio Shack and Espana, the two teams with most riders at the front of the field. World champion Philippe Gilbert, number 51 in the rainbow jersey. After finishing second on yesterday's stage, he is having some trouble on this climb.
Yesterday he did look very good, and I think he has a great shot at winning a stage later on in this year's Vuelta.
Now back to the front.
Cataldo really starting to stretch some legs.
Again, he won stage 16 of the Vuelta last year, the 28-year-old Italian for Team Sky. Now setting the pace as the breakaway starts to lose some riders.
Cataldo's a very good climber, Steve, and he's starting to show that right now. He's finished 12th overall in the Giro d'Italia last year.
All right, Alejandro Valverde is there, number 1 in the dark colors with the green helmet for Movistar. Joaquim Rodriguez in the red and white of Katusha right behind him. Off to their right, overall race leader Vincenzo Nibali.
And Christian Meyer coming back from the breakaway group. The very effective domestique on the Orica Green Edge team that usually we see on the front of the field all day, but today he was in the break.
This is live coverage of stage number 8 of the Vuelta a España here on Universal Sports, presented by Earbud. Steve Schlanger alongside Todd Gogulski. We are down to the final 13 kilometers. The breakaway coming apart. Their lead under 1 minute to this main field. All of the top general classification riders are here.
Look at Fabian Cancellara. After all that work, he's just going to have to just kind of ride within himself here. And he'll lose some time today. Not a big deal for him, though.
So Boucher at the front, team leader Horner behind. And 22 seconds to these three leaders with 8.5 kilometers now left to go. And from here, it's a pretty steady slope. Between 7 and 8% most of the way, and that's the average gradient.
Look at this, Kreuziger in trouble. Roman Kreuziger, the leader of Saxo Tinkoff. Very unexpected to see him in trouble. He's a guy who came into today 42 seconds down, the general classification hope for that team, and he looks like he's starting to crack.
Not their highest GC rider. That's Nicholas Roach at 8 seconds back in 3rd place overall, but Kreuziger really their long-term overall threat, and now that may be slipping away.
Yeah, very surprising to see Kreuziger in that position. Especially, look at the size of this group. This could be 40 guys still left in this group.
That's certainly a surprise. Well, Horner looking back to see exactly who's with him and how many. And these are the riders losing time with 8K left.
A lot of damage being done. Matteo Monteguti there, coming off number 18. The NetApp man, 156, is Bartosz Huzarski. He was in the early break and then did a bunch of work chasing at the front of the peloton. Well, let's see if that NetApp work pays off for them, if Leopold Koenig is able to transform this mountain into a big stage win for him and his team.
All right, the clock starts for our three leaders at the 8K banner. Let's see how far back the overall contenders are in the field. Now, Luis Mate is the name written on the road as the field comes through 17 seconds down. Mate, by the way, one of the only riders who really knows this climb. He lives near here, rides it in training a few times a week, and Bach Mollema now going to the frontier. Team leader for the Belkin team, making acceleration.
Big acceleration there by him. I talked with his director yesterday, Steve, Eric Decker, just to check in, see how Mollema was doing. He says he's feeling great. First 7 stages have been good for him. And he said this stage was a new chapter of the bike race with a longer and harder climb and many more to come. But he said Mollema's feeling very good.
All right, this is still the front of the race. Our 3 riders who just went out of the frame on the right-hand side of the screen. Now the small group of general classification contenders, next group on the road. So Mollema was making that acceleration, but he's a little way back.
Okay.
So he was making an acceleration, but he's a little behind the other GC riders, it appears.
Yeah, it does appear that way. He just was trying to get back up in there. Mollema is a guy who's good on both long climbs, and he's also very punchy and explosive. But we haven't really seen much long climbing yet in this race, and maybe he's just having an off day.
How about Chris Horner, still second wheel? Had teammate Fabian Cancellara pacing him earlier. Now Matthew Boucher, who's come back from the original breakaway. He's helping the American out at the front.
It's great to keep your team leader right at the front like that so he can respond to any attacks, and he's out of the wind. And that's the benefit of having Boucher up the road in that early breakaway. He can soft pedal just a little bit on the climb when it got really hard, go back, and then have that extra bit of freshness to help out Horner.
Peñas Blancos climb being used for the first time ever in the Vuelta a Espana here today on stage number 8.
Beñat and Chosti struggling for Movistar coming off. And, you know, he finished 10th overall last year.
7K left for the small peloton. And it looks like Valls is now gone. So it's Nares here at the front, followed by Cataldo.
Oh, look at Nares just grinding the massive gear out of the saddle. And you can see Cataldo just spinning away. But Boucher still a trusty teammate.
The 2 Americans, Boucher and Horner, at the front of the general classification group. And boy, they are coming up on the back of our 2 leaders very quickly here. Just 10 seconds down now with 6.5 kilometers left.
Well, it looked like it was never to be for that breakaway group to succeed. But certainly Cataldo and Nares have put in a big effort on this climb. And I got to say, having Boucher there at the front of the field for Horner right now is massive for the American.
Dominic Nares at one point was the virtual overall race leader on the road when that 13-man breakaway had 4.5 minutes. That was earlier in the stage, and Nares starting the day 2:57 behind the man in the red jersey there, Vincenzo Nibali. But the gap has now almost been entirely reduced because of the pressure being applied by this field with Radio Shack at the front. Nibali, 4th wheel from the front of the peloton right now in the red jersey.
And really the entire pressure from the peloton on the climb has been put on by Radio Shack. It's been one of just 3 guys from that team who's been on the front driving the chase and reducing the peloton. And now we're looking at maybe 25, 30 guys left, probably about 30 left in that peloton. You can see the colors of the Dutch national road champion Johnny Hogerland hanging on to the back of that group.
And here they come. You see him on the right-hand side of the screen, led by Radio Shack. That small, reduced main field. Bringing back our 2 leaders. Dialing them in with 6 kilometers now remaining to the summit finish. There's Sammy Sanchez, number 91 for Euskaltel. And this is a climb that would typically suit him, but not riding at the front right now.
Yeah, he has not had very great legs, that's for sure. We saw him crack on the very first summit finish of the race and lost almost a couple of minutes there, and it's just been hard for him so far in this race. But if we move up to the front, there's Chris Horner out of the saddle. He does a lot of out of the saddle riding, the American. You notice when he won stage 3, he was out of the saddle probably about the final kilometer of the bike race. It was the same when he won the Sierra Road climb back in 2011 at the Tour of California, and he went on to win that race overall.
Well, considering what's happening right now, it looks like our stage winner is going to come from the reduced main field of general classification contenders. So that means that we also have a possibility of the race lead changing hands today, because there are riders within time bonus proximity of the red jersey. So we could see things shuffling in the general classification just a bit here. Time bonuses available at the line of 10, 6, and 4 seconds for the first three.
Well, there are only 2 guys in the general classification that are within 10 seconds of the overall leader, and that's Vincenzo Nibali. So Horner's 3 seconds down, and Roach is 8 seconds down. So if either of those guys gets the maximum time bonification of 10 seconds and Nibali doesn't get a time bonification, well, then we'll have a new race leader. But there should be some kind of separation at the finish line as well. I don't think they're going to ride it all the way up and just sprint it out.
Well, also the possibility of Nibali getting dropped as well. So that brings more guys into time bonus proximity of perhaps moving forward if Nibali shouldn't be able to hold the wheels of some of these other top GC riders here in the final 5K. The handshake signifies that the breakaway is finally over. The 2 remnants of what was a 13-man group earlier in the stage about to be caught, Dario Cataldo and Dominic Neres. Small field of overall hopefuls coming through with 5 kilometers left to go to the summit finish that's being used for the first time ever in the Vuelta a Espana, the Peñas Blancas. And the first of 3 straight summit finishes on this second weekend of the season's 3rd Grand Tour. Look how small this group is now at the front of the race. And a lot of the general classification hopefuls are right here. Chris Horner, the American for Radio Shack, who wore the red jersey for 1 day, his second wheel. Vincenzo Nibali, the current overall leader, is right there near the front in a red jersey at the 5K banner. You also have Ivan Basso in the green for Cannondale, the 2-time winner of the Giro d'Italia. Joaquim Rodriguez of Katusha, the Spaniard in search of his first ever Grand Tour title, is in this group. And so is Alejandro Valverde, former Vuelta winner, wearing number 1 for Movistar, also looking very good in this group right now. There is Rodriguez in the red and white, right behind Valverde, who's in the dark blue and the green for Movistar. Sammy Sanchez, number 91, who we just mentioned for the Euskaltel team, starting to move up now in the group.
Interesting to see how far back Valverde and Rodriguez are. They're kind of in the middle of this group. It's only Horner of the true big favorites. It's Horner and Nibali up in the top, but not the other guys. Now there goes Antone.
Igor Antone, the first acceleration from this group of general classification contenders, coming just inside of 5K from the finish.
It looks like there's a response there from NetApp, but I do not believe that is Leopold Koenig. I think that is David de la Cruz on that squad who is going.
Antone, 5:42 down on the general classification, so not an immediate threat here to the lead of Vincenzo Nibali. That's an Argos Shimano rider.
Well, Warren Barguil, the young man on the Argos team, was one of the guys they wanted to see just how he would perform on this climb today. He's kind of an unknown quantity in this type of competition with a climb like this.
Well, the Euskaltel team is disbanding at the end of the season, looking for some final results to go out on a high. And that is Barguil of the Argos Shimano team, now second on the road behind Antone with 4K left. There's Antone in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Now, the Euskaltel team has had a tough start to this Vuelta with the time lost by their overall leader, Sammy Sanchez. Antone, a couple of years ago, led this Vuelta before crashing out almost inexplicably when he was wearing the overall leader's jersey. Looked like he was in position to maybe go on to win the race overall, and he's never really been the same since.
It's true. He was on incredible form that year, and that was a huge lost opportunity for him. Looking at these guys here, Chris Horner taking a drink, Nibali taking a drink. They don't appear to be right at their limit to me, Steve. I think this is a bit of a wait-and-see type of a situation. But one thing I can tell you is Matthew Boucher on the front He's a good friend of Chris Horner's. They often have roomed together over the years, and he has been an integral part of Horner's win at both País Vasco in 2010 and the Tour of California in 2011, setting some blistering tempos on some climbs for Chris to then attack from.
This tempo looks pretty good from Igor Anton as the Movistar rider now moves out front here. Now that is Eros Kopecky, number 2. He's 52 seconds behind Nibali in the general classification. Alejandro Valverde, of course, is the team leader, 21 seconds behind. He's sitting back in the group. And now other riders going forward. Horner has to respond. Astana, Katusha.
And that is Chris Horner that's leading the chase there. And I'm looking for the red jersey of Vincenzo. So Horner is on the gas. Ivan Santaromita for BMC, the Italian champion, is the man who really got the hostilities going. Horner came up to his wheel.
Here's our leader, Igor Anton, with just over 3 kilometers left. And now more action coming from that group. Horner.
Oh, big attack by Chris here with 3K to go. And nobody able to follow the 41-year-old American.
Nibali's a few seconds back, about 4 or 5 wheels behind Horner, who's now chasing Igor Anton, the leader, with 3K left. Igor Anton, not a big threat on the GC. Again, he's 5:42 down, but he is a threat for time bonuses. And Horner would love a time bonus to move back into the red jersey of overall race leader. Anton inside the 3K banner. Horner leading the chase. Nibali coming up. He's now 2 wheels behind Horner. 8% is the slope right here.
Oh, Nibali has made it back up.
Ivan Basso right behind Vincenzo Nibali. He's going to come around him in the green, number 71, and he's going to go past Horner as well to the front of this group.
Well, and I can tell you, Nibali will not mark Basso, but you can see Horner got on the wheel because Horner wants this to be as hard as possible if he's got good legs.
You know who else is coming up? Sergio Henao and Rigoberto Urán of Team Sky, a double threat.
Oh, yeah, indeed. They're both right there. Urán in front, Henao right behind. Remember, Henao on the first summit finish, he suffered from not eating enough. He bonked and he lost time, but they say he's got good form.
All right, Anton again, he is the leader. Or no, that's actually Sammy Sanchez, who's number 91 and losing contact. His teammate, Igor Anton, up the road. So this is behind with Sanchez getting dropped by the group.
And this is all kinds of pain back there as men struggling to stay on the wheels. And now Horner in the wind on his own. No teammates left. And Nibali just marking the wheel. He's glued right on the American.
This is Igor Anton leading by 9 seconds. Teammate of Sammy Sanchez, number 92. He's at the front of the stage. 2.5K from the finish. Behind him, Horner at the front. Then Nibali, Basso. Then it's Sergio Henao and Rigoberto Urán, the next 2 for Team Sky. Joaquim Rodriguez still there for Katusha as well. And nobody making a move. No one with a big acceleration from the GC hopefuls here as we come up on the final 2K.
Basso now getting the diesel spooled up and trying to put a little bit of pressure on those guys. And honestly, for Chris Horner, if he wants to get away, he's going to benefit from other guys going to the front of that group and making it hard so that he's out of the wind and then he can attack after it's been very hard.
Time bonuses, 10, 6, and 4 seconds for the first 3. And right now, Anton is the first rider on the road. Nibali here in the red jersey getting a drink at the front of this group. Horner just off to his left. Anton with 2K left.
Anton is doing exactly what he wanted to do, which was benefit from all the favorites in the general classification, looking at each other and basically neutralizing each other. Meanwhile, he rides up the road and tries to get the stage.
Oh, there goes Leopold Koenig, number 151 for NetApp. FDJ now chasing. Leopold Koenig, 48 seconds down on the general classification. Thibaut Pinot is the rider for FDJ, who's just behind, but this is Koenig on the left-hand side of the screen. This is the reason that NetApp was riding at the front of the field earlier, to bring back that large breakaway.
Indeed, and you're not going to see Vincenzo Nibali burying himself to try and bring back Leopold Koenig. You're not going to see Horner doing that either, nor Valverde, nor Rodriguez. These are the opportunists. Yeah, it's a very hard climb, but if you're not marked, it's a little bit easier to get up the road. And look at this, 4 guys now.
With under 2 kilometers left to go. There's our leader, Igor Anton. Just inside of 6 minutes down in the general classification. He's been given some leash and looking to ride away with a stage win. The chase behind. This is that small field that's getting ever smaller of general classification riders. Nibali has a teammate pacing him in front.
Looks like about 15 guys. Basso is up the road with Pinot. Also, we've got the winner from one of our earlier stages as well, and one of the teammates of Joaquim Rodriguez, and that's Daniel Moreno. Excuse me, I'll get it out eventually.
He's in the white jersey. So Basso making a move on a climb that we noted really suits him well. Basso coming to the front. He's 132 down on the general classification.
And that's pretty much from the opening day's team time trial, where his Cannondale team struggled.
Other riders can't hold the pace here.
That's Heimar Zubeldia for Radio Shack, just getting split off the back, so he wasn't quite able to get up there to help his team leader and teammate Chris Horner. But Basso really digging in with Moreno, Pinot.
So it's Basso, followed by Daniel Moreno and then Thibaut Pinot. And they're chasing Igor Anton, whose lead is slipping away inside the final kilometer.
And look at this, Leopold Koenig is maybe going to get across as well to Anton. So this thing is coming right down to the wire.
Leopold Koenig almost won stage number 2. Just finishing behind Nicholas Roach, making a play for the win on the summit finish of stage number 8 now. Back here, Nibali leading Horner, Sergio Henao, Alejandro Valverde, and Joaquim Rodriguez. Just ahead, Ivan Basso in front of Daniel Moreno and Thibaut Pinot. And at the very front, Igor Anton, hoping to hold on to this lead.
Oh, and these uphill finishes like this, they just grind away for so long when you're in the final kilometer. It feels like an eternity. And for Anton, that's exactly it right now.
Nicholas Roach was in there in that group as well, and now Leopold Koenig goes by Igor Anton. He is the leader and looking to ride away with the stage win.
Wow, this would be massive for him and his team. Remember, they're a Division II team. They're invited to the race. This would be the first Grand Tour win for his team.
And looking to move up in the GC as well. He's only 48 seconds down. But here comes Basso leading the charge behind. Koenig trying to hang on. Basso now second on the road after 4 hours.
I don't think anybody's going to deny Leopold Koenig of the stage win here. Moreno could be a danger man. He's got a lot of pop, and here he comes now with 200 meters to go.
Looking for his second stage win. Moreno coming up on the back of Koenig as they hit the final 100 meters.
And don't forget about the general classification battle. Nicholas Roach in this group. He comes in only 8 seconds down on the GC.
And Koenig is going to hang on. The first ever Grand Tour stage win for the NetApp squad on the first ever summit finish here on the Peñas Blancas at the Vuelta.
And it looked to me like Nicholas Roach was third. He gets the time bonus. He's going to ride into the red jersey as the overall leader.
Alejandro Valverde also coming up. The Skyriders, Henao and Rigoberto Urán. And there's Nibali in the red jersey, crossing over right now, surrendering the red jersey.
It looks to me like it's going to go to Nicholas Roach, the winner of stage number 2.
Leopold Koenig, the winner of the day on the summit finish. Leopold Koenig, the rider from the Czech Republic. Coming forward from the group after his team did a lot of work at the front of the peloton earlier in the stage to control the breakaway.
A great guy in the mountains, a very talented climber after winning the Mount Diablo stage of the Tour of California earlier this year and almost picking up a summit finish of this year's Vuelta earlier.
And at this point, it looked like he was going to ride away to an easy win. Well, it wouldn't be that simple. He would get a little of a push.
Daniel Moreno in the white jersey there for Katusha, who's already picked up a summit finish in this year's Vuelta with a hard charge late. But Koenig would not be denied, and he would pick up the NetApp Endura team's first stage win in a Grand Tour.
As Nicholas Roach, with a time bonus, is now the new leader. By 17 seconds over both Chris Horner and Daniel Moreno, Vincenzo Nibali slips all the way down to fourth and 18 seconds back. Roach, who won stage 2, his first ever Grand Tour stage win in his career, and now leading a Grand Tour for the first time ever after 1 week at the Vuelta.
And he was turning himself in through all kinds of pain in the final couple of kilometers, but it paid off.
Huge day for the 29-year-old Irishman from the Saxo Tinkoff team. In this second Sunday with the fourth different rider in the red jersey we've seen over the course of the opening week here at the Spanish Grand Tour. Nicholas Roach, the new leader over Chris Horner and Daniel Moreno. Race 164 kilometers heading northeast through south central Spain, still deep in the heart of the Andalusia region.
And a hot day for the riders as well, as they started hours ago, and 2 intermediate sprints late in the race, the category 2 climb of the Frailes, and then from there it goes downhill, and then the setup for that final 1 kilometer kicker in Valdepeñas de Jaén. Now what's going to happen is on that category 2 climb, the crescendo is going to start to build, and it's just going to get more intense until they get to that final kilometer when the fireworks are really going to light up.
And we are now live with the riders on a sunny, warm day once again in south central Spain. Temperature in the mid-80s, mostly sunny skies, riding through some vineyards at the moment, headed towards that final kilometer and the uphill at Valdepeñas de Jaén. There is a breakaway, as you might anticipate, of 5 riders up the road. Right now, this is the main field, all pretty much together in pursuit. Certainly not the big breakaway of 13 riders we saw yesterday, a more manageable group of 5 out there on the road today. And a lot at stake in stage number 9. You have that Cat 2 climb that will set things up for the nasty finish. And you have to wonder, will this be the day that Katusha really sends the strike force out in Moreno and Perito? They both know the climb well. Rodriguez has won on the Valdepeñas de Jaén before, and he needs to make up time. He's over a minute back on the general classification.
Indeed, he does need to make up time. His teammate Daniel Moreno sits in 3rd place in the general classification at 17 seconds, tied with the American Chris Horner, who's in 2nd. And Moreno is a big card that the Katusha team can play today as well.
All right, so our 5 leaders are on the left. The peloton on the right, separated by less than 3 minutes. Margin was close to 6.5 earlier in the stage. Here are the names of the riders in the move, and one of the most prominent names from Vakon Soleil, the rider right here, the Dutch national champion at the front, Johnny Hogerland. You know, if the Hoog is in a Grand Tour, he's going to be in a breakaway at least 1, if not more, days during the race.
Yeah, he's actually not been as active as we often see. It doesn't mean that he hasn't tried to get into these breaks, but you can't just say today I'm going to make the break and then make the break. You got to follow the attacks, go with the counter attacks at the beginning of the race, and make the right selection there in the early moments of the race to get in that move.
Still over 60 kilometers left to go, so quite a ways out from the finish. Not yet 3 hours on the bike for these riders here. And the front of the field being led by BMC. So, wondering if they think Philippe Gilbert has the legs to do well on that final climb.
It is interesting to see BMC there, because originally the break of 5 guys started picking up like a minute every 5 or 10K. They got up to over 5 minutes, and then Katusha went to the front of the peloton and brought it back in, reined it in a little bit. And I thought at that point maybe Katusha would ride the front the entire way, but apparently they've gotten it close enough now that they have sort of relaxed their troops a little bit and let some other teams come to the front.
And the rider for FDJ there, the 26-year-old Frenchman Anthony Roux, rotating to the front, along with the aforementioned Johnny Hogerland in the break, Luke Rowe of Team Sky, Francisco Aramendia of Caja Rural, and Lloyd Braun of AG2R.
Rowe there, you can see just how thin the jersey is. You can see the strap of his heart rate monitor. This is Aramendia. It's almost every day that we see him in the breakaway. I believe this is his 3rd big breakaway of this year's Vuelta.
And right there, I was just kidding. It's not Lloyd Braun. It's Lloyd Mondry. Just a quick Seinfeld reference for you. Go.
See, I didn't even catch it. That's how out of it I was.
I just tried to slip it in there. That is Lloyd Mondry, the 31-year-old Frenchman for the French-based AG2R squad. Completing his 10th season as a professional, by the way. So a decade in the pro peloton for Mondry as of this year.
Those Seinfeld references, I mean, those are references I should actually pick up. It's a show that I enjoy watching.
I would hope. It makes it more fun when you do.
Yeah, I apologize.
All right, so 2.5 minutes now for the breakaway with under 60 kilometers left to go. But when you consider a breakaway on a day like this and any chance to stay away, considering the steepness of that final climb in the last kilometer, conventional wisdom over the years has told us that you almost have to have a minute or more going into that last kilometer to have any chance on the steep ramps.
Yeah, and you know, you love to throw out that conventional wisdom. Sometimes cycling, of course, doesn't follow the conventional wisdom, but I agree with you, Steve. It's maybe if it's one guy, he needs 45 seconds or a minute. If it's a couple of guys or a few guys, then theoretically they'll be a little bit fresher, so they can maybe get by with a smaller advantage when they get to that climb. But I'm telling you right now, 58K to go, 225 for the break. It does not look at all good for the breakaway, even to make it close to that final climb.
Well, we're talking about pitches up to almost 30%. That's standing still type of stuff. And when you have riders like Rodriguez and others who can be so good like that, the difference in speed between riders from the breakaway who have been out there all day and a fresh Perito or a Daniel Moreno, it's almost like night and day what we'll see from them on that last climb. And so much can be made up and so much can be lost in that short 1 kilometer stretch. Indeed.
And now you can see Zaitsev on the front for the Katusha squad. So they're still keeping their hand in this. You know, let's go back a few days ago. We had a climb on a stage that the climb was, hey, there's our new red jersey, Nicholas Roach. First time for him ever leading a Grand Tour. He's ridden incredibly well. Been on the podium in a couple of stage finishes, both of them uphill. Winning a stage earlier in the race as well.
Now Roach, the 4th different rider to wear the red jersey now in the first 9 days of the race.
And actually, this is a pretty decent finish for him. I mean, he's a guy who's been close the last couple of times this has been in the race, 2010 and 2011. He always finished pretty close in there. So don't expect him to lose that jersey today. It's possible, sure. But the way he's riding right now, I think he should have his designs on holding on to that jersey on this finish.
I think Moreno might be his biggest threat to take it away with a potential win and a time bonus. So we will see as the stage unfolds. Now under 60 kilometers left to go on day 9. As we come back, Aramendia is about to be brought back to the field with 25 kilometers left to go. They are really riding now. 3 kilometers away from the start of the Category 2 ascent that will last for 6K. And now Aramendia has been caught. Nedap and Dura riding at the front with Movistar, Belkin, and Cannondale just behind. This thing is starting to really fire up.
Indeed it is, Steve. And, you know, they have two guys that are potentially really good at the finish. One we saw take the win yesterday in Leo Koenig, but the other man is Bartosz Huzarski, who finished second to Rodriguez just last year in the stage of the Giro d'Italia to Assisi, and that was a very steep finish, and Huzarski almost got the win there, so he's a very punchy guy on a steep finish.
Gogo, are you surprised that the breakaway was brought back like this before even the start of the Category 2 climb?
Not completely, Steve, because as we were talking the first couple of segments of our show today, this is a day where the crescendo just starts to build, and it just gets harder and harder all the way to the finish. And this thing is not going to let up on the climb, and it's not going to let up on the descent to the finish, because the roads are small and everybody is absolutely panicked about the final kilometer that they're going to see in the race.
Now Belkin riding at the front. The riders almost at the base of that climb that starts with 22 kilometers left to go. Belkin with some disappointment in yesterday's stage number 8.
A big time for both Lawrence ten Dam as well as Bauke Mollema. Mollema losing about 2.5 minutes. That was a bad day for him, and he's got to shake it off now and think about, is he still going to race for a top place on the general classification, or maybe change the objectives and go for a stage win.
All right, that somebody is going to try to attack at some point, still with over 23 kilometers left to go on the stage. Category 2 climb might provide a good springboard. They're going to need some time going into the final kilometer of the stage overall that hits 30% to the uphill finish. So do you think someone can use this as a launch pad coming up and make it stick all the way?
I really don't. It's just the final climb is so hard, even though it's only a kilometer long, that guys don't have it enough when they get there if they're dangling off the front. So I think this is all about marking your rivals over this climb, staying in position, fighting for that position for the kilometers down to the finish, and then capitalizing on that good position and hopefully some really good legs. But they're not even on the climb, and all these guys are coming out the back of the peloton right now.
And a rider from Caja Rural jumping forward from the field. Remember, Aramendia from the same team was the last rider brought back from the breakaway just a few moments ago, and this is Ahmet Chiruka. No surprise that he would launch a move like this.
No surprise at all. And here's the guy who wants to test our theory of whether or not somebody can get over the top of the climb and make it all the way. And as I mentioned a moment ago, they're not really on the climb. Well, I say climb in quotation marks because,
look at this.
We have a crash and a complete bottleneck.
Total standstill.
So this is a nightmare for anybody back here, because the guys up front have the speed, and these guys are sitting up waiting for the road to clear. Huzarski 156 on the left of your screen. So he was actually the guy on the front working hard. So here they are not riding for him for NetApp.
And this is back to Ahmet Chiruka now at the very front as they start this climb that averages just under 6% and will summit with 16 kilometers left to go.
And Steve, now look at all these guys at the back of the group that are now having to struggle to close gaps. All these guys have been stopped by that bottleneck, and a lot of these guys will not get back on. And I was mentioning the climb in quotation marks because the event says that it starts with 22K to go. So they're finally on it, but they've been climbing for a while already.
And for the folks who didn't see, you did literally put your fingers up in quotation marks, so you weren't fooling around.
Yeah, well, that's the
universal sign. I got you.
Yeah.
Here's the front of the bike race right now. Ahmet Chiruka. He's a good climber. Out of the saddle, motoring up these narrow roads. First categorized climb of the day, coming inside the final 25 kilometers of a 164K effort.
I remember Chiruka spent the bulk of his career riding for Euskaltel, but this year moved over to the Caja Rural team. So that's a professional continental team. It's a step down from Euskaltel, but he has come out swinging a lot this year, winning the Vuelta a Asturias earlier this year in May, a stage race there, as well as winning stage 1. And so he's been very good, and also won the mountains classification at País Vasco in April.
These are the riders who have been dropped. Marco Pinotti was the man for BMC. Now right there, number 203, and that is the winner of a stage a few days ago, Michael Morkov. He was the winner when Tony Martin was caught right before the finish line after his solo effort for over 100 miles out on the day. Tony Martin almost time trialing to a win, but caught right at the line.
And Steve, let me just describe a little bit the change in motivation and also opportunity when you switch teams, because Chiruka off the front right now with those wins I just mentioned. He had never won a professional race before this year. So when he was on the bigger team, he was always supporting a bigger rider, a bigger name like a Sammy Sanchez. This year he's had freedom to fly on his own, and he's done good by doing that.
Lead almost 10 seconds.
You can see he's way down in the general classification, so the GC men don't have to think about him per se. Although a lot of those GC men, like Rodriguez, Moreno, the guys that have a lot of punch, they don't want someone off the front because they want to get that time bonus at the end of 10 seconds.
All right, this is the chase behind, and not too far back. Chris Horner is there near the front of this group. And again, he had Fabian Cancellara just in front of him. Same scenario as yesterday.
And the
And now another attack from the field. Remember, Chiruka is up front. Yeah, that's Robert Kieserlowski of the Radio Shack Leopard team. Has that special jersey.
That's right. He's the Croatian national road champion. So he goes up to Chiruka and has a lot of suds as he pushes the pace immediately.
And just seconds behind the peloton. Summit at 16K from the finish, so 3 kilometers of climbing left to go.
So very interesting to see Kieserlowski. You can see Horner in the white jersey with the blue helmet, about 4 guys back from the front of the group. Horner now has a teammate up the road in Robert Kieserlowski. And, you know, that could potentially be a springboard for Horner to try and do something. But my guess is this is more Kieserlowski striking out to try and do something on the stage. Just keep a little pressure off of Horner and force the other GC men and other teams to do the chasing.
Now, Chiruka didn't last long out front, so Kieserlowski the only man ahead of this field now.
Tall thinks that Boasson-Hagen can win a stage of this year's Vuelta.
He was in a lot of pain with his shoulder at the Tour de France, as a Cofidis rider now also launches a move off the front of the field.
Well, people sensing just a little bit of a lull at the front of the peloton. Let's see if Kieserlowski's going to get on that one, and the answer is no.
So Kieserlowski has been fully brought back by the field. Remember, at the very front, it's Edvald Boasson-Hagen.
I believe this is Nicholas Aday, the Cofidis rider there, Steve, who is in the hunt for the mountains classification. He came into today sitting in 4th overall, and he was 7 points behind Nicholas Roach. Now, this is a Cat 1, so the win is worth 10, and second place is worth 6.
Looks like Boasson-Hagen is going to be the first to the summit.
And it's, pardon me, it's a Cat 2 climb, so it's 5 for the win and 3 for second.
Movistar now with 3 riders at the front. Valverde is the 3rd rider in line, with Chris Horner sitting on his wheel. Joaquim Rodriguez not too far behind for the Katusha squad in the red and white. Other riders having trouble at the back of the field. That is Steve Chanel, number 14.
Picks up the water from a spectator, pours it over the body. These are hot, hot climbs. You don't have that cooling effect of all the wind. Nice to get some water on the system, and Boasson-Hagen first over the top. Let's see what he's got to back that up with now for a potential stage bid. It's going to be tough.
All right, so some tight technical corners and a somewhat tricky and twisting descent coming up.
Looked like Chris Horner missed grabbing a bottle on the overhead. Aday second over the climb. and he's going to, looks like maybe he's going to press on. Nope, he's kind of sitting up.
Been in multiple breakaways in the first week of the Vuelta.
See just how small this road is here. Horner sitting in 4th position. Valverde's got teammates at the front. These are the reasons why you want to be close to the front. With a tiny road like this, if somebody has a mishap or if a gap opens up, you may never get across it.
So a day about to be scooped up. That'll leave Boassenhagen the only man out front. 4 hours in and one nasty kilometer coming up at the finish. Again, that final kilometer is so difficult. And you have to have such an advantage going in. You can't have 14 seconds. Or a dozen seconds, even 15, 20. It's not going to be enough.
No, they got to have some real time at the end. But, you know, you applaud the guys for going for it here. And you never know if there is a separation that comes up to them. Well, then you have a real shot at getting a stage win. But one guy on his own, very tough to make it all the way. Boassenhagen crashing in the Tour de France. He ended up fracturing his shoulder, eventually pulling out. And really came into this race, well, having not raced since July. So it was a lot of training for him and using the race to try and sort of get that rhythm back of the race, of these really hard efforts and all the craziness that comes with racing in a peloton of almost 200 riders.
Now Movistar at the front of the field. That final 1K climb, not as good for Alejandro Valverde as it is for a Joaquim Rodriguez. But Valverde wants to maintain his position, stay at the front, try to stay in the general vicinity of his other top GC rivals as Boassenhagen hits the 11K banner.
And he's got 9 seconds on Luis Leon Sanchez. So it's all very close together here. There goes Sanchez, and the peloton should not be far behind.
The gap right at 20 seconds, it looks like. With Movistar leading the charge, Katusha has settled in behind now. Well, Joaquim Rodriguez and his teammate Daniel Moreno for the Katusha squad, two of the big favorites today. And, well, Moreno, with a good ride, could not only win the stage, but he could take the red jersey of overall race leader.
Indeed, he's only 17 seconds down, so he just needs to get a little bit of time and a stage win on Nicholas Roche, and he could change that jersey for the red jersey as the overall leader.
Now, Joaquim Rodriguez is their long-term team leader for Katusha, but if you're wondering about Moreno's ambitions for today, he said at the start that he dreams of taking the red jersey today, so you have to believe he's going to go for it. 10-second time bonus for winning the stage, 6 seconds for second place, 4 seconds for third. Would also need a gap on Nicholas Roche, which is certainly a possibility on a steep climb like we have at the finish.
It is certainly a possibility. Boassenhagen, I don't think he's going to make it, Steve. He looks like he's starting to really come apart. These little uphill sections are just so hard on the solo guy. Luis Leon Sanchez looking a little bit more composed than Boassenhagen on this climb, with just over 9 kilometers to go.
Now, for some context, you'll look back at the last 2 times they used the Val de Peñas de Jaén climb at the end of a Vuelta stage. It was in 2010 and then 2011. Each time they did it, there was a single rider at the front when they hit the base of the climb. Neither time did that rider survive. It was Rigoberto Urán in 2010, David Monfutier in 2011. Those guys were blown away and didn't even factor in the finale.
Yeah, and look at Luca Paolini on the front for Katusha now. Just mowed down Luis Leon Sanchez. 9K to go. We'll see, starting on the clock now, how much time Edvald Boassenhagen has lost. Oh, it came down precipitously. It was 20 seconds a kilometer ago. Now it's 10 or 11.
With Katusha at the front.
Boasson-Hagen, a great bike handler. He's a very all-round rider. He's got a good sprint. He's good at climbing on long climbs. He's good at climbing on punchy climbs. So he's got the chops. It's just that when you're by yourself, you're doing so much work. And right now you think of the other guys that are going to be attacking the final climb. Guys like Rodriguez, Moreno, Horner, Valverde, all those guys are sitting on a wheel in the draft, coasting on this descent, while Boasson-Hagen is having to throttle it.
Now, Gogo, the key for a stage like this, patience. Having the patience to wait until you absolutely need to make the move. It's easy to say, it's hard to do.
Yeah, that's right. Patience is key. And we may see the winning move on that final climb come inside the final 500 meters. It may explode immediately, but guys just following whoever's taking the early initiative, and then finally when things start to settle down and guys really start to get bogged down, someone attacks late.
Well, Joaquim Rodriguez, certainly the big favorite because of his acumen at steep uphill finishes like this. Going back to 2010, he attacked too early, ran out of gas. Igor Anton went away in the final 300 meters and won the stage. So even Perito, being as strong as he is on this type of a final climb, once we get there, he even went too early and didn't have the patience, learned his lesson, came back in 2011, waited until later and used that to win the stage a couple of years ago.
Yeah, Luca Paolini now dropping his teammates. Probably pretty disappointed, actually, that he has to stop pedaling because he's used all, he wants to stretch it out. He wants to split the peloton. He wants to keep Rodriguez in a good spot. And when his teammates can't sit on his wheel, all that energy goes to waste.
If you're one of the general classification hopefuls and you're not good on the steep pitches and you know you have one coming up that hits almost 30%, how nervous are you right now? What's the anxiety level like?
There is a ton of anxiety. Look at how small this road is as Boasson-Hagen plummets down and kind of resetting his line a couple times through there. So this is sketchy bike racing right now on a small road. It's not an easy run into the climb. And then this effort that is happening is going to continue, and these nerves are going to continue. And look at Paolini using the entire road right over to the guardrail, looking back, making sure he's got his teammates in tow. And then they have to fight for position into the final, and it's not a straight final. There are two corners. A really sharp right-hander sets them up onto the hill, and they lose all their momentum. So the nerves are exploding.
That's something we noted earlier, how a stage that can seem fairly innocuous overall can be so demanding as Boasson-Hagen hits the 5K banner here. You go over a Category 2 climb, but you have this very tricky, delicate descent. Narrow roads, technical corners, and then you have 1 kilometer of climbing at the very end. That's a killer for some guys, hitting up to 30%. So you always think about the big climbing days, the beyond classification climbs, the 20K efforts, but days like this can also be decisive as well.
Well, and really a day like this is almost more nerve-wracking because you don't have a long time to settle into a climb and find your rhythm. And if you're buried a few guys back, you work around some guys. A day like today, it happens so fast. It's like, it literally is going to be like fireworks. You light the fuse, and then things just start going off right into the bottom and at the bottom of the climb.
And a lot of the pace behind Boasson-Hagen right now is about position for that final climb. These riders here, led by Katusha, they know that in 3 kilometers things are going to start, and they have to be near the front. You've got to be in the first 10, 15 places when that wall comes upon you.
Yeah, for sure. If you're not in the top 15 places, I don't think you're going to be a factor at all up that climb. And Katusha wants any other rider to have a chance to move up.
Nicholas Roach is there in the red jersey as well. He looks like he is about 15th or so. Overall race leader, sitting behind a few Astana riders. Vincenzo Nibali is up there, back in the turquoise colors today after losing the red jersey. 2.5 kilometers away from the Valdepeñas de Jaén climb that will define stage number 9 at the Vuelta. Boasson-Hagen, the leader, coming to the 3K banner.
You can see why guys attack on that climb every year before they get to the final. With these small roads, you just think, well, maybe I have a shot. Maybe because it's so tricky, somebody can get away and have enough of a gap. But they just never seem to get the gap because the peloton is so determined to set up for that final kilometer.
And they call it the wall for a reason. Some guys will look like they're standing still once they hit it. Katusha kicking up the pace here.
Boy, look at Paolini. I mean, this has literally been Paolini on the front for several kilometers now, chasing Boasson-Hagen, and he's not really so concerned about Boasson-Hagen. Is just making it so hard that other guys can't move up. You see Chris Horner there just waving his arm. He's trying to get the motorcycle to get out of the way.
His teammate is in the green jersey and shorts because he's leading the points competition, and he's sitting about 5th wheel right now as Boasson-Hagen is caught. And now they set it up for this 1K climb that will start momentarily. Number 121 is Joaquim Rodriguez. The red jersey of Nicholas Roach off to his left shoulder for Saxo Bank. He's the overall top man in the standings. 3 turquoise jerseys of Astana. Vincenzo Nibali is one of those. Sitting behind his teammate there in the middle of the screen.
And there are not that many guys left in this group, considering it was only a Category 2 climb, but they absolutely put everything on the line for this final K.
Philippe Gilbert is there in the rainbow jersey of the world champion. Chris Horner's a few wheels back in a white jersey for Radio Shack. Ivan Santaromita is there, the teammate of Philippe Gilbert. Do you rule him out for this stage?
I don't rule him out, but I think it's got to go more towards Gilbert for BMC today.
The crowd is waiting for the first attack, and it's going to come from Astana. As they make the left-hand turn and they start the final climb to the finish. 1K uphill with gradients as steep as 30% coming up.
And it looked like Brajkovic was the man who got it going for Astana, but he is now peeled off, and it's Cannondale on the front.
Watch how narrow it gets through here. Movistar's second wheel.
And that's that corner that just scrubs off all the speed. You can see Rodriguez right back there for Katusha, perfectly placed.
Daniel Moreno is there as well. It's like Igor Anton coming up in that orange jersey of Euskaltel along the fencing on the left-hand side of the course.
And now it really gets steep.
And that is Tanel Kangert of Astana, number 36, but he's passed by Daniel Moreno in the green jersey. Moreno rides to the front.
Wow, Moreno's going really early on this climb. It may be too early.
Valverde chasing. He is second on the road right now in the dark colors of Movistar.
Yep.
Joaquim Rodriguez behind him.
Yeah, Rodriguez struggling to keep on the wheel of Valverde, but it's 3 Spaniards now at the front.
Daniel Moreno at the front in the green jersey, not only riding for the stage win, he's riding for the red jersey of the overall race leader as well.
He's been going incredibly well on these summit finishes, Steve. He's already got 1 win under his belt, and he looks almost unstoppable today.
Moreno, just 17 seconds back of the race leader, Nicholas Roach, as the day started. Behind him, Valverde and Perito right here.
Sammy Sanchez, Roach, Gilbert.
Well, Nicholas Roach is trying to hang on to that red jersey, desperate to maintain the race lead. Daniel Moreno, 200 meters from a stage win.
And Moreno is definitely going to get this win. The question is he going to get the red jersey in the process?
Oh, here comes Roach. He's making a move to stay in red. Daniel Moreno said he dreamed of taking the red jersey earlier today before the start of the stage. It looks like he's going to get the victory on stage 9, but will he get that dream, that red jersey in the process? Moreno wins on the Valdepeñas de Jaén. Alejandro Valverde takes second. Perito Rodriguez third. And here comes Nicholas Roach to take fourth.
Oh, it's going to be tight. It is going to be tight. It was either 7 or 8 seconds back to Roach. He didn't get a time bonus. Horner now crossing.
Well, we know that Daniel Moreno got the 10-second time bonus for winning the stage. Now we see what the gap is to Nicholas Roach here. What a finish on stage 9 of the Vuelta. 4 days shy of his 32nd birthday. And now the 5th different rider to wear the red jersey of overall leader after the first 9 days of the Vuelta a Espana. It has been exciting so far, and for Daniel Moreno, today's a dream come true. All right, the new overall standings after 9 days of the Vuelta. That is the literal top 6 with Daniel Moreno now a 1-second lead over Nicholas Roach. Ivan Basso also another big name at the bottom of that leaderboard, 137 back of the new man in the red jersey. And a lot of prominent names within contact of the top spot right now. But the red jersey belongs to Daniel Moreno because of this win and the time bonus that went with it.
A fantastic ride by Moreno. Yeah, sure, he was hurting pretty bad at the end, but he went up that climb a lot faster than I thought guys were going to this year, and he didn't slow down that much at the end.